Hello, my friends. I'm happy to announce that today I have Kelroy James here in the meeting room, and he is telling something about his vision on yourvision.blog. And I'm happy to welcome Kelroy from UK. Hello, Kelroy.
Hi, George. How are you? Hello, everyone.
Yeah,
Nice to be
doing
here.
great.
Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. Kelroy, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, and how you're connected to Web3.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So, Kelroy James. Originally, I'm from St. Vincent in the Caribbean, but I moved to the UK 14 years ago to join the Royal Navy. So I'm currently a petty officer in the Royal Navy, and my specialism, I'm supply chain logistician. So recently, I've been fortunate to become part of what is known as the Percy Hobart Innovation Fellowship. This is where the military is trying to teach members, how to be more innovative and how to think agilely. So as part of that program, I was attached to a Web3 company, ironically, because my interest was in blockchain within supply chain and how it can be used to, improve global supply chains. So I was attached to a company called Cordial World. And out of that, we did some research with a local South London partnership to see how we can create better opportunities for SMEs within the South London boroughs. There's 5 large boroughs, and this part of London is very big economically. So we wanted to see how we can build. It was a very interesting project because it involved not just community wealth building, but how thinking ahead in the future, Web3, blockchain, the concept of digital identity for citizens can all be incorporated to produce better social value. Following that, George, you and I, we were part of the DeFi Talents program. So I also did decentralized finance with Frankfurt School Blockchain Center. I also did the Influencer by DNA, where they taught us, Philip Standen, so taught us how we can become multiplicators in the Web3 space so that we can start to share knowledge of, how innovation and blockchain and Web3. So I've been using some of that skills taught to produce a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn that I publish every week about the 5 important news articles about blockchain. So that's published, and I also publish regularly within a publication, Data Driven Investor, and on Medium. But I think one of the biggest things as well is I was found by a startup company called Defactor, who is looking to utilize tokenization of real world assets to improve liquidity for small and medium-sized enterprises. This was very coincidental because they found me based on my background and my work. So I am now currently a brand ambassador, trying to inform and make people awareness of how blockchain and tokenization can be used.
So you're tokenizing real world assets, and
Yes.
I think this is a very important topic for the blockchain technology. And what are you doing here specifically?
Yes, I think besides all of the issues surrounding blockchain and crypto, we've seen a lot in the news about FTX and the crash. When you get to the underlying use case of blockchain, and the key issue of blockchain is what is the use case? How best can you use it? Because when I first became interested, when I first learned about it 5 years ago, when I heard about Bitcoin, I immediately thought that doesn't make any sense to me because I did, basic economics and understanding how currencies work and what it's backed by. I knew a little bit of how fiat currencies were brought about. Originally, currencies were backed by something tangible, which was the gold standard. So a currency was backed by something of physical value. So even the countries were printing money, it was backed by the full faith of the gold reserves that was held. Now we got rid of the gold standard and introduced fiat currency, where governments just simply printed money. But that was also, backed by the ability of governments to tax citizens or, apply tariffs on trade. So it was also backed by something physical, all controlled by, central banks and government. Now with blockchain, from my understanding, is simply just a digital database. It removes the need to have, physical accounting. You can do it in a much more, distributed. You can have consensus. If people know about blockchain and it's all about, transparency and achieving consensus, this is what, blockchain creates. So in terms of tokenizing real world assets, what you're doing here now is that you actually just back in full faith of what you're doing digitally by something physical. And I think as more persons become aware of the information, as you can see, although there's the issue around crypto, a lot of major financial corporations, JP Morgan, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, their financial sections are all working. They've all realized the importance of using tokenization, not just for good, but for securities. You can tokenize securities, shares. I mean, a share is simply something online, but now you can then tokenize it. And what this does and what the factor is doing is seeking to make this more available to everyday investors. Because currently there is a high bar, a high standard for somebody to invest, in large assets. So almost any physical thing on earth, real estate, gold, buildings, anything can now then be tokenization. And before we could probably discuss, tokenization is simply representing something physically, an asset, a physical asset on chain, utilizing blockchain. So then you could say fractionalize a building, a piece of real estate, and then rather than having to invest £10,000, to access that property as an investment, you can then fractionalize that down, and then somebody, a nurse, a firefighter, a teacher, they can then start investing in high value assets, which is at the minute only now available to high-end investors.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So if you buy shares, you have to buy for a huge amount of money, because otherwise the fees are too high.
Yes.
And with this, you can buy really a small fraction, and then it's very easy for the people to hold it and also to follow the economy, that they can see and that they can learn what's going on. And how you're saying, that's really very, very important. Kelroy, what are you doing here with Defector?
Yes, so Defector, I think I became their brand ambassador back in July. They launched, they started about a year ago, and they just to raise awareness of what they're doing. And it was very interesting to me, because when I first read about it, as I said, I'm in supply chain, and I've been posting about supply chain for the past 4 years without realizing it, simply because I understand a lot of the pain points that takes place in moving, goods around the world. So even though I'm in the military, I still have to export and import just like a normal, person, small business. And it involves a lot of manual processes and paperwork. But it's even more so for a small business overseas who wishes to import something, whether to the UK. So imagine a small company either in Morocco or the Caribbean, and they're trying to export something. It involves a lot of paperwork that takes time and effort. But in financing that movement, right, it involves what is called supply chain finance or trade finance. So they normally have to approach a big bank. Only a few big banks deal in this sort of financing, because they might not have the money at the start of the export to export overseas. You have to go to a bank, get finance to pay for your consignment to ship, right? It's very expensive. And when you include like taxes and tariffs and so forth, it's very difficult for SMEs to export their goods. Now, the factor there team were original engineers who worked in supply chain. So they understood a lot of the issues. I think when it first started, they were executives from Console Freight. So I was approached and discussed it with the CEO, Alexander Gutierrez, and it was so fantastic because he was an engineer and understood supply chain. So we both understood the inefficiencies that was taking place, and here's what the fact is trying to solve. Now, their idea was using this blockchain new technology, but because as I said, it's all about a database related, is to allow small businesses to tokenize invoices, because your invoice becomes almost like a security. And we spoke about it before, tokenizing securities like stock and so forth on chain. So the payment window within trade finance is very short, like 90 days or so. So they're actually seeking to tokenize an invoice, which is an agreement to pay between a supplier and so forth, and have that as backing to improve liquidity for the small business. Because in all business, it doesn't matter how large or small, cash is king. You need cash to run your operations. So the time it takes for you to have an invoice and accounts payable and receivable can sometimes run over 30, 90 days. And that doesn't oil the operations of a small business. But by now tokenizing their invoices and using their assets as collateral, I think one of the first companies that did it with was a whiskey company in Ireland, where their whiskey, as you know, whiskey is a very high-end luxury product enjoyed around the world. But to enable this company to grow and expand, it was it is needed for them to have cash operations and liquidity to run the business. So by tokenizing their invoices and have the whiskey as assets, it can allow them to then get cash to run the business and expand. So what the factor is trying to do is to expand this around the world. So it's not just a local effect. Even though they're based in Ireland, their aim is to do this locally, because trade, and this is the beauty about it, trade takes place globally. It's not just a local issue, it's global trade. And as you can see with what's been happening in the supply chain, what's happened when China locked down, when they had the containers being delayed, shipments being delayed, all of this is going to affect, not just the supplier, but also the end consumer. Because you would have then empty shelves, or you might have inflation because you don't have enough goods available. All of that is an issue. And a lot of this stems from the way trade is conducted. I think McKinsey just published an article, I'm going to republish on my LinkedIn, that describes how our trading systems have still been the same for the past 300 years, which is a lot of paperwork. As I mentioned before, trade it requires what is called a bill of lading when you're traveling, and that is still a paper-based item, a paper-based document.
And for our guests to know, bill of lading is a piece of paper. It's not standardized. It looks at every company different, and you go with this bill of lading to the harbor that you can get your containers out. And if everything looks different, there is no guarantee that somebody is coming with the original document. So their fraud is a big problem.
Yeah, two documents: the bill of lading, which is used as a verification of when you're transporting goods, and a letter of credit, which is what the small exporter or even a big business would use to go to a bank to get access to funds to do the transportation. Those two items are still paper-based, and what we're doing is digitalizing those documents, but also being able to tokenize them as invoices that would create liquidity for small and medium-sized exporters.
And we know that 85% of our goods are transported with ships.
Yeah.
This is a big problem. And with D-Factor, it can become much easier for the companies. And also the paperwork gets less, fraud gets less, because everything is on the blockchain and it's documented. And that's very, very important for the future and for trading. And the article you published on LinkedIn about McKinsey, can you tell us a little bit more about this, Kelroy?
Oh yes, this is a really fascinating article. But I think in the present context, I think with the eyes on trade, it really sets the foundation of how we need to transform and upgrade what is happening. I mean, when globalization took place 30 years ago, the idea of having fast and speedy access to capital and goods was ambitious, but it was built, unfortunately, on not a digital foundation. So, and this is exactly probably why Satoshi created blockchain after 2008, because payments are still slow. I think even recently the Russian president said that we needed to move to a payment system using blockchain, because if you think about SWIFT and even transferring money around the world by banks, it takes 2 and 3 days because it's all manual and not interlinked, which is where blockchain comes in. And the same thing can be applied to the way we do trade, we do trading. So by having a faster system, more seamless and more integrated, we can actually achieve what globalization should have been set out to do 30 years ago. This is the perfect time. This is where Web3 and blockchain is so exciting for me.
Do you think it gets more safe and cheaper for the end consumer if the processes are more effective and brought to the blockchain?
Yeah, because I think that was one of my things. When I thought about it, from my perspective, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated from the Caribbean, and when I came over to the UK, I still had I had a family or business back home, and one of the things that struck me was either if I have to send the money back home, there's always an additional cost. There's an extra cost. If I use the bank, it takes too long. It doesn't arrive in time to be of use. They might have an emergency. It's too long and expensive. If I use a third party, an intermediary, Western Union, MoneyGram, they get less than I send, and there's always a cost, right? So cutting out all of these intermediaries, extra unnecessary paperwork, that was the whole dream, I believe, of Satoshi and creating blockchain.
Yes, and that gives us a lot of advantages if everything gets more effective and if everything gets faster and secure. And blockchain gives us this opportunity. And the solutions via blockchain, they are coming for sure. It's just a question when,
yes,
and not if.
Yes.
Kelroy, it's very interesting what you are telling us, and also your articles. We will link them. We will link them below, that the people can read it. They are very interesting. I was able to read your last article up front. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I wish you all the best in the future with your Web3 journey, and I hope that we meet soon again. Thank you very much, Kelroy.
Thank you, George. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me.